Greetings, everyone. Ronnie Landis here. I wanted to hop on the camera real quick and just share a little bit of a message that was coming through to me, as these things often do, as I'm writing, researching, listening to other videos, reflecting on different things, and really being in this portal of 2019, feeling like it's already emerging, and all the dust and all the dirt, so to speak, of 2018 and everything that's transpired, everything that's evolved, everything that's been shaken to the brims, everything that's quote unquote fallen apart, obviously as a way to realign and reorganize all those fallen particles of energy that were shaped in a way that was prior circumstances, prior events in our life. And so I've just been really in this interesting place and just taking all this in and really doing my best to put back the pieces and to go through a reclamation process, meaning reclaiming all the different parts of me that had been, let's say, either misaligned or just simply got lost in the cycle of everything that I was personally going through. I know a lot of other people have their own experiences. I know this will make a lot of sense to a lot of people. So, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is the reclamation process, reclaiming yourself. If you feel like there's been parts missing, you feel like things have been out of order, things have been confusing, there's a lot of energy emerging through you, different timelines in your life opening up, your life not looking the way that you thought it was going to look a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever the case is, and adapting with as much grace as can be expected to shifting into the new timeline, which may look completely different than the old timelines that we may have been attached to or only could see from where we were before. So new things are opening up. And with that, this reclamation process of fully owning all the aspects of ourselves, because I feel like 2018, 2017 for sure, but 2018 as well, was putting the final touches, I guess, on an alchemical process that humanity, and I don't want to say putting the final touches on humanity's alchemical process, because as far as I can see, humanity as a collective whole is dug themselves in a collective hole. And that's a whole different conversation, what's going to happen to the populace. But what I can say individually for those people that are pioneering the future of humanity, the people that whether you like it or not, if you've been called, you got to answer the call, right? God qualifies the called, or God does not call the qualified. God qualifies the called. And that, that again is another interesting point that's really important to remind ourselves in this re-ownership process. Is that if you've been called, if you feel a call, even if you don't know exactly what the call is, that may be because you haven't fully picked up the phone to answer the call. You may have been avoiding some of the call, even though deep in your soul, you can feel it. You know that it's there. But sometimes we pick up the phone, but we hesitate and put it back down, but it keeps on ringing, doesn't it? It keeps on ringing. If it keeps knocking on your door, then my best piece of advice for mental, emotional, physical, spiritual health and well-being is to pick up the call and at least hear what the voice on the other end has to say, so to speak, right? To actually receive the call and then decide if you want to follow through on the call, because we do live in a reality of free will. So don't feel the pressure that you necessarily have to take the call in the big quest and the big mission all at once, but just at least answer the call, right? Just so you can see, just so we can hear what's on the other end. Because you may be me and everyone has a propensity to use our imagination in a way that isn't necessarily most productive. And we can misimagine things and let our mind go wild and create these ideas or these expectations that are somewhat overwhelming and don't feel completely exciting. Or maybe they do feel exciting, but we have no idea how we're going to cross the bridge, right? We have no idea how we're going to manifest those things, to embody those things. Well, I just want to say, don't let yourself be overwhelmed or scared until you at least hear the call, because there's a vibratory infusement, meaning that it's not about the words that you hear or even the pictures that you get in your mind. It's about the vibratory energy that's transmitted to you or from within you upon opening yourself up enough to see the vision that's being called of you, to hear the call, to receive the call. And then from that place, you can take it in and meditate on it. And then you can decide if you want to answer the call. But here's the caveat. I don't know anybody that actually has listened to the call, that's picked up the phone and fully listened and fully was present with it and really did some deep work that hasn't answered the call. Because the call is essentially, we do live in a reality of free will, but the only way to avoid the call is to sedate yourself, is to medicate yourself or tranquilize yourself, to essentially numb yourself in some way. But ultimately, if you don't answer the call, it's going to get a lot less subtle. It's going to be more overt. It's going to be more pronounced. Those calls are going to stop ringing on the phone, and then they're going to start knocking on your door, and that knock will get louder, and that's what we call evolutionary pressure, right? That's the pressure that starts to come up and starts to pound the heart, starts to pound the duodenum, starts to it starts to not the duodenum, it's part of your intestinal tract. Anyways, the solar plexus, the lunar plexus, different subject, just starts to vibrate inside of you, and you can't really get rid of it unless you numb yourself. So you have to numb yourself more and more and more with whatever mechanisms, whatever coping mechanisms our society freely gives out to everybody, right? That's why cleansing, detoxing, and fasting is so essential. The psychedelic experience is another way, but there is no backdoor to God. And that's another thing too, is that no matter how you choose to crack the calcified armor, that essentially is where your light is, where your courage is, where your faith is, where your true authentic self is, and the power that you have inside of you to carry out the call. Lose my train of thought there for a second. The call is going to still be there. So what are you going to do about it, right? Are you going to continue to numb? And when I say you, I don't mean you listening to this. I just mean that's what's coming through me. So don't take it personal if this doesn't apply specifically to you. But it probably does, because it applies to all of us. We're all getting the call. If you're watching this video, you're getting the call, and you're navigating through it and trying to get to that point where you pick up the call and you answer it. Say, who's on the other line? This is so-and-so. This is Ronnie Landis. I'm answering the call. What do you have for me? And from there, a wellspring of courage starts to come up. From there, a wellspring of faith and hope and personal empowerment and healing starts to open up in you, because when you answer the call, that calcified armor around the wounds, around the traumatic imprints, around the unresolved pain that's stored in the body, that's trying to protect itself. So it calcifies itself in a sense and creates an armoring or a buffer around its own sensitivities. But the thing is, answering the call is how you heal yourself. Somebody comes to me, one time, interestingly enough, one of the things I say in my lectures quite often now is an experience I had where a woman called me up to work with me, and she had stage 4 breast cancer. She was around 60 years old, I think, and living in the UK. And we got into a conversation, and she was trying to figure out, like, do I go the medical route? Do I do chemo, radiation, surgery? Do I go naturopathic route? Does it really work? All these different herbs and stuff. Like, she was just like not quite sure where to go, right? And she said, "What would you do if you were in my situation?" And I told her the honest to God truth. I told her exactly what I would do. I said, well, since you asked, if I were in your situation, what I would do is I would immediately start closing out all my accounts. I would start closing the loops that have me attached to this situation. And I would book a plane ticket to Hawaii. I would immediately get onto juice cleansing and juice fasting, and I would go find the nearest waterfall. I'd take a hike to the waterfall. I would sit underneath a waterfall, and then I would make my decision. What was I saying to this woman? What I was saying is that I would not make a rash decision with my life. I would not throw my life in one direction in the hands of people in white trench coats with the worst statistical record in cancer reversal, which I won't go into what that is, but the medical route, the allopathic route, the chemo, radiation, surgery route has an extraordinarily low percentage of reversal, and especially the way they skew those statistics further proves that point. Right? But people are so indoctrinated, and the fear impulse immediately is triggered because your own mortality starts to face you in the face. And essentially, the reason why that's so scary and the reason why people make those impulsive decisions with their life is because, that fear impulse shuts down the critical thinking aspects of our brain. It shuts down certain regions of the brain that are problem solving, but it puts you into a reactivity. Right? And it triggers the amygdala and it triggers the fear response. And so you're only able to react because you're in a dangerous, life-threatening situation. However, you never ever want to make a decision, however small or big, in that state because you can't think through and you can't be sensitive to what your heart is telling you. You can't be somatically connected to your body because your body is the communication system, not the disembodied mind, especially when it's running wild, because fear has basically flooded the body's chemistry with stress response. So the mind can't actually handle that, and it will disembody itself and it will try to get out of the body because the body is under such duress. So you never make decisions from that place. So essentially what I was telling this woman is that I would acknowledge the reality that everything in my life has led up to this moment. This didn't just spontaneously manifest, right? The malignancy and the cancer and the all the different factors of what transpires into stage 1 cancer, let alone stage 4, are repeated, rehearsed patterns of thought, emotion, spiritual conflict, and all the physical obstructions, environmental toxicity that build up over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, most likely in this woman's case, right? And so, look, if you're not going to deal with all that, then if we can't plug out the sink, so to speak, we can't plug out the bathtub and we can't get out of our circumstances and our situations, then we're lost. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what herbs you take. It doesn't matter what kind of cleansing you do because you are currently in your present environment, which is all contributed to the manifestation of this dis-ease. So you have to change your environment. You have to get into a more colorful environment. You have to re-engage. You have to re-establish a sense of inspiration, right? It's that inspirational force is going to catalyze the healing. It's not the food in of itself. The food will take dramatically a longer time to have an effect on the person if they don't change their suggestive environment. If they don't change their environment to an environment that has suggestive messages of hope and beauty and inspiration, then that person falls to the wayside. That person essentially runs the risk of receiving the messages of mediocrity from the world around her, from the life that she knows. You have to essentially disassociate from the person that you have been accustomed to being, and you have to step into being a completely different person, because the person that she was a woman with stage 4 breast cancer and had all these different open loops and all these different circumstantial factors, and also it was highly toxic and really like a parasitic culture and environment. So what is that going to breed within the soul that's struggling for life in this body that's close to checking out? You got to change your life. You got to access courage, because by following through on that and doing that and investing in oneself and making such a drastic soul-based decision, you activate those powers from within you. Right? You activate your intrinsic innate healing factors, which then are receptive to the food and the nutrition and the external healing modalities. Right? That's the way that it works. You can't have one without the other. You can't change your mind and not change your diet. You can't change your diet and not change your mind, right? These things all work synonymously, and we have to start looking at it like that. And the environment that one's in is so paramount. It's so important. And so that's an example of following the call. I don't know if she did that. We've been out of contact, so maybe I'll update you on that in another talk. But that was my advice, and that was the honest to God's truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to candy coat this, because somebody is asking me about their life. You know what I mean? When somebody comes to me and they ask me a life decision, I'm not in a fantastical thing of like, oh, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be perfect. No, it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. It's a far from perfect situation. And you may find yourself in that kind of situation in your life. You may be in that kind of situation, maybe not a disease situation, maybe you are, but maybe you're in a crisis in your life. And how do you solve a crisis? Well, you don't run away from it, and you don't be overwhelmed by it, and you don't attack it recklessly. You pull back and you presence yourself. And so, and then you activate the full utility of your mind, and you allow your mind and your heart and your soul to work together. And you actually step back in a lot of cases. That's why I told her, like, you got to step back from your life and all the different things here, because you basically got to be bold. You got to be courage. This isn't the time to get afraid. This isn't the time to back out. This isn't the time to just run off to the medical establishment and take their cocktail of stuff. It's not the time to be afraid. It's the time to be bold. It's the time to be focused. It's time to be courageous. Right? And I've had to do that in my life. The reason I could tell that woman, by the way, with such conviction and such clarity is because I knew exactly what it would take for her to do that, because I've done that. I've done that multiple times, actually. I've given up everything when I was in LA, 6 years ago or something, and really starting to establish my career as a speaker and an author and a leading thinker in LA. And I was doing speaking events all the time, and really building a lot of momentum. And then there came a point where I started struggling, and I started being weighed down by the frequencies and the energies of that environment. And all my pushing and pursuing just didn't feel as meaningful, as purposeful. I didn't feel like I was totally supported in the way that I felt like I should feel. And there was this calling to leave it all behind for a period of time and travel to the big island of Hawaii. And so I did. I did everything I needed to do. I had literally enough money to get to Hawaii, but then through a number of circumstances, I was welcomed into a beautiful 40-acre permaculture farm, and lived there for 3 months solid, did 10 lectures there, collaborated, learned about permaculture, learned about the fruits and the vegetables and the superfoods that I was so fond of, but got my first in-person experience with the durian and with cacao and with things I didn't even know about at the time, like jackfruit and Rollinia, and the difference between papayas that come from Hawaii versus come from some third world country or Mexico, and learned about real avocados. What are avocados really? These little rinky dinky Haas avocados that are shipped from Mexico are like, I really got to see the difference between wild food and domesticated food. And I had been talking about this for years, but I actually had my first actual real experience, and it deepened my understanding of all this. It deepened the work that I do. It deepened me as an educator and as a thought leader for nutrition. It actually allowed me to understand, what does it go into growing cacao? What does that process look like? How do we get our hands dirty in the dirt? Like, what is the dirt even really in this whole culture of microorganisms and everything that's involved? It's like really tuning into nature and spending more time in the wildness of nature. And I had to jump off the ledge, so to speak, and I made it work. I figured it out, and that was what needed to happen. And it healed me. It healed a part of me. And then I continued the journey, and I've done the same thing in a lot of situations. It didn't make sense, but it felt right, felt like what needed to happen. I knew that if I jumped off the ledge at the right time when I felt the call, then I would grow wings on the way down. I'd learn how to fly, right? And that's what we're talking about in that situation with that woman. It's like, look, you got to learn to fly. You can't be this caterpillar dissolving perpetually for infinity in the chrysalis. At some point, you got to be like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to go out. I'm ready to become a butterfly. I'm ready to let the light in. Because if you think about the chrysalis metaphor, the chrysalis is an enclosed system. It's an enclosed container, right? Where there's no light that can come through. But at some point, that chrysalis breaks open just a little bit, little cracks, and the light comes through. And then that's when you have to step into the light. And you have to just be your full self and have the courage and just step out, because that's the only way that you're going to grow your wings. It's the only way you're going to, learn how to fly. You can't stay safe in that little chrysalis, because think about it. It's the same thing with this whole evolutionary pressure idea, is that chrysalis, imagine you're dissolving in a chrysalis over and over and over, and you start to kind of reach to the light, then you fall back, and it's like you're dissolving over and over and over. It's this perpetual thing. And that seems really painful. That seems like suffering. It doesn't seem like what we came here to do. So with all that said, again, I don't know. These are all very organic. This is literally streamlined thoughts, coming through me. There's a whole other message as well, but I don't want to take up too much time. It would be somewhat redundant, but interesting to listen to nonetheless. But really that's really the most important thing, is that stepping into this new year, stepping into this 2-week cycle that we have with the solstice from when it first happened, on Friday, I believe, and then Saturday was the full moon. We're deep in some cosmological transformative times. The best thing that you can do for your healing and transformation process is to reconcile with the patterns or habits that you need to let go, and to just step into it and replace those habits with upgraded habits, whether it's food, it's substances, it's relationship stuff, it's your fitness lifestyle routine, it's your meditation or your yoga that maybe you've been slacking on, or the cleanse that you want to do or whatever. It's time to really just do it. It's time to do it. It's time to step into it. It's time to stop playing safe, playing half-hearted. And I promise you that pressure or that angst that you might be feeling, that will go away, because that's just energy. That's energy that's being contained like steam building up in a kettle. You got to let it out, but then you got to put it into something, right? You don't want to masturbate your creativity away. You want to put that into something useful, that's productive, that's supporting the call that you're getting, right? You want to answer the call, but you want to follow where the call takes you. So step boldly out into this new year. Make the plans that you need to make right now. I really encourage everyone, get one of these out. This is every day. I've been writing in this and just detailing my goals, detailing my intentions, detailing the next stage of Ronnie Landis 2.0. I'm about to be stepping more into the Hollywood scene. Funny enough, I was in the Hollywood scene a little bit all those years back in LA, and I met a lot of people, a lot of very influential people. Probably would have made a lot more money. Probably would have been much more well known in the world at this point, but I just felt like this is where the call took me, and I needed to develop myself. I needed more depth. I needed more commitment. I needed more natural connection, because if I'm going to bring this message to the world about natural healing and connecting to the natural world through the food that we eat, and our connection to life itself and the spiritual teachings and everything that I bring forth, then I have to go through a crucible. I have to go through an initiation process, because you can't be an adept, you can't be an expert at something if you haven't been initiated into it. And life is the best initiator of them all. So now that seems to be what's happening, and I'm just like, okay, 2019 is coming fast, it's coming strong, and it is calling. So I need to get prepared. I need to get ready. I've intended this for 10 years now, doing this work. Everything has been building to this point where my message gets out to the bigger audiences. And I have to get ready. Even if I'm not ready, I have to get ready. It's like if you're going to have a baby with someone and it was unexpected, it's like you either bail out, you abort, or you just get ready. And you make the fundamental changes you need to make, and you do it, because that's the path to meaning. It may not be the path to convenience or temporary pleasure, but it is the path to meaning. And that pressure comes when we're not acting on a deeper meaning. So the path of liberation, the path of transformation moving into 2019 is the path of meaning, a meaningful life, a more meaning in our life to guide our actions, to guide our behavior. That's going to get us through those initiation phases and is going to ultimately allow us to be the pioneers of the future of humanity, because the whole of humanity ain't doing it. They're not doing it. So who's going to do? Who's going to do it? Yeah, we're going to do it. Kicking and screaming, or gracefully accepting the call, because the call is from deep within. What an honor. What a privilege. So let's live it. This is my message to all of you. Peace and blessings. See you again soon.